So yes, I'm cutting off the back of my workbench top, and there's two reasons for that. And hang on, I need the wide angle lens for this. First, my shop is only about 10.5 feet wide. It's narrow. So I've been thinking about rearranging my shop, trying to just make it more efficient for the way I use it. And as I'm looking around, one of the things that I noticed is that I've got an overhang on the back of my workbench. The top overhangs the cabinet by a few inches. And if I got rid of that, I could push this closer to the wall and I gain some more space out here. Currently my workbench is just about 26 inches deep and 62 inches long. And I know some of you are asking, why give up valuable workbench space? But with the bench against the wall, you don't really work on that side of the bench. Probably most of what I do is in the front 15 inches, if that. And you know, there's not that much that I really need over 2 feet for. And of course, that's not my only work surface. I also have this mobile outfeed table that I use as an assembly table for clamping and gluing and talking to the camera. So yeah, it would be nice to make this bigger. And my second reason for cutting up the workbench is, as I just mentioned, I'm thinking about rearranging the shop. So let me give you a little teaser about that, and then we'll get to cutting. So here I am roughly in the center of my shop, and if you look way to the back wall, this is my planer. And I use my planer on basically every project. Every project that I build in here practically, and I don't have a permanent place for it in my workflow. I have to bring it out each time, set it up, hook up the dust collector, do my work, and then take it down and shove it back against the wall. And I've just been thinking about how, well, that's a pain in the neck, and it's just not very efficient. So I really want to find a way to make my planer more a permanent, central, easily accessible part of my shop. And so that's had me thinking about my shop. What can I do to rearrange it? Can I find a better place to put it? I thought about this space here behind my bandsaw, but then it's in the way of the bandsaw, and it's kind of in the way of the table, and I don't really think there's enough room right now. I thought about down here under the wing of my workbench. Now there's not enough room for it yet, but I could maybe make some room, or I could even cut the top shorter so then it could stay upright. Not really sure about that. This mobile table, I can also tuck behind the table saw, which opens this space up. But I also use this as an assembly table, and then it's in the way of the saw if I leave it here. So I really like to have it most of the time against the wall. And I really like it mobile. So like everybody, I want to have it all. I want my planer easily accessible, centrally located in the shop, which is where I use it all the time. I want my mobile assembly table to stay mobile, to stay available, to not be blocking the table saw. And I want to keep a workbench. But I can't have it all because it also has to fit within 10 foot 6 inches. And that brings us back to the topic of today's video, which is cutting off the back of my workbench. I think I can live without it, and I know it's going to give me a little bit more space, which, as I'm planning on somehow rearranging the shop, that can only help. 10 foot 6. I built this bench over 20 years ago, so that's long before I got into YouTube. So I thought I'd give a quick tour of its quirks and features before I perform surgery on the back of it. A woodworking workbench height should be set based on your own body. So I'm not going to tell you how tall my bench is. You take your arms, drop them to the side, and on me, I set my height basically at the level of my flat-handed palm, like that. A little bit higher than that. If you work a lot with hand planes, you might find this height a bit on the high side. Some people talk about putting your hand down to like a fist level or whatnot. For me, I found this height has worked really well over the years. I could even stand for it to be even an inch, maybe 2 inches higher, because I don't like to bend over so much. The base structure is made from some 4x4 oak, some southern yellow pine, and some random pine. I got these from some pallets a long time ago. Here's a look at the back. You can see the structure of the legs, and the drawers are just in a plywood box that was fit in between. It's resting on top of the stretcher that goes across. I guess the most unique thing about my workbench is that the back of the top is plywood, 2 layers, and the front is hardwood maple. And that decision was all about money. Like I said, this is over 20 years ago. I built it in 2001. I was a lot younger then, a lot less gray hair, and I had a lot less money. And hardwood is expensive. And I'd done some talking and reading and all that, and it's like, you know, the front of your workbench is where you do all the banging and the pounding. So that's the part that needs to be strong. The back just needs to be flat. So the front 8 inches is 1 3/4 maple strips laid up on edge, nice and strong. And the back 17 inches is just 2 layers of cheap plywood. I'm gonna take these brackets off because they're in the way. I want to be able to trim this back 3.5, maybe even 4 inches. This angular piece I put in to support this diagonal bit, but it doesn't actually touch at the top. I was worried this would sag over time. And I'm afraid that this is the part where I find out that, yep, 20-year ago art used glue. Let's see if I can... So it actually wasn't glued, it was, there was a couple of screws coming from the box. You have to remember the bench was built without the cabinet, and I used it like that for a while, and then I added the box. So I'm not sure how important this is. It seems to rock a bit, so I'm gonna replace it with a piece of plywood, which is skinnier, because I'm hoping to get like 3.5 or 4 inches off the back, so I need to push in as much as I can. Time to do some measuring. With a piece of plywood, yeah, I can do 3.5 inches off the back. All right, 3.5. Unfortunately, I don't have a track saw. And I do have one of these, but it's not long enough. But on the other hand, this does not need to be perfect. So I will just clamp the board in place. Okay, here we go. I hope I don't hit any metal. 20 years ago, I really don't remember if I put any screws in when I was putting these 2 pieces of plywood together, so fingers crossed. The saw wasn't quite thick enough. It got through the 2 sheets of plywood, but I had another piece under it, so I need to finish that by hand. There we go. And yes, now these look weird. They're coming off next. Enough. Okay. I'm going to do the other one off camera. And like on the top, on the bottom of the legs, I also had to cut off the protruding part. And that meant that I had to take the feet, which were here, and I had to drill new holes to move the feet in a bit so I could cut off the outside edge. All right. Oh yeah, that's going right. Nice and flush against the wall. Now let's have to re-level the feet since I changed them out. There it is, back in position, and it's hard to tell that I've taken that much out of it because it just looks the same to me. Okay, I've got the shop put back together. I got the table saw back into position and my outfeed mobile table, and my workbench is now flush to the wall. This feels amazing to me. There is now 40 inches between my bench and the saw. I had to go measure this again because it's only 3.5 inches, but when I first set this up, it felt like a lot more. 10'6", every inch counts. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you on the next one.